cold November night, the wind cut through Penelope Brooks like 1,000 tiny knives. She wrapped her thin jacket tighter around her body, but it did nothing against the bitter November cold. The bus stop stood empty under a flickering streetlight. The digital sign blinked mockingly. Next bus, 6:47 a.m. Penelope checked her phone. 11:34 p.m. The battery icon showed 5%. Of course, after a 12-hour shift at the diner, her feet ached, her back hurt, and all she wanted was to collapse into bed. But the last bus had left 3 minutes ago, and she had missed it by seconds. Watching helplessly as the taillights disappeared down the dark street, Detroit winters were unforgiving. The temperature had dropped below freezing, and frost was already forming on the bus shelter's metal bench. Penelope's breath came out in visible puffs. She looked down the empty street, hoping for a taxi. But the neighborhood was dead at this hour. An unexpected offer, the sound of an engine, made her turn. A sleek black sedan slowed as it approached the bus stop. Expensive, the kind of car Penelope only saw in magazines. The window rolled down smoothly, revealing a man in his mid-30s. Dark hair, sharp jawline, eyes that looked almost black in the dim light. "You look like you could use a ride," he said. His voice was deep, calm. Every warning Penelope had ever heard screamed in her head. Never get in a car with strangers. Never trust someone just because they seem nice. Never put yourself in danger. But the cold was seeping into her bones. Her phone was dying. The walk home would take over an hour through neighborhoods that got worse after dark. "I'm okay," Penelope said, her voice shaking from the cold. "Bus will come soon." The man glanced at the digital sign. "Not until morning," Penelope bit her lip. He was right. "Look, I understand if you're scared," the man continued. "But it's freezing out here. I can drop you wherever you need to go. No strings attached." Penelope studied his face. He didn't look threatening. Well-dressed, clean-cut, calm demeanor. The car was pristine, leather seats visible through the window. Something about him felt safe, though she couldn't explain why. "Where are you headed?" she asked cautiously, driving home from a late meeting. "I passed through this area, okay?" Penelope made a decision that would change everything. "Okay, thank you." Inside the warm car, the interior smelled like leather and expensive cologne. Warmth from the heater wrapped around Penelope like a blanket. She sank into the passenger seat, her frozen fingers slowly coming back to life. The man pulled away from the curb smoothly. "I'm Jonathan," he said. "Penelope." She kept her hands in her lap, still tense. "Where to, Penelope?" She gave him the address. A rundown part of town with boarded-up windows and graffiti-covered walls. She saw something flicker across his face but couldn't read it. They drove in silence for a few minutes. Penelope watched the city pass by outside the window. Downtown Detroit at night, all neon signs and empty sidewalks. Jonathan asked. 12 hours? "I work at Gerald's Diner on 5th Street. I know that place. Good coffee." Penelope glanced at him. This man with his expensive car and tailored coat knew her rundown diner? "You've been there?" "Years ago. Different life." His hands gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. Unexpected connections, something in his tone made Penelope look closer. Despite the expensive clothes and confident air, there was something worn in his eyes. Something that spoke of hard times and difficult memories. "You said late meeting," Penelope ventured. "What do you do?" "Real estate development. Commercial properties mostly." He paused. "What about you?" "Been at the diner long?" 3 years. Saving up for nursing school." Penelope surprised herself by sharing that. She usually kept her dreams private. "That's admirable. Slow going. Rent takes most of my paycheck." Jonathan nodded. He didn't offer sympathy or advice, just understanding. Penelope appreciated that. They stopped at a red light. A homeless man pushed a shopping cart across the intersection. Jonathan watched him, and again Penelope saw something shift in his expression. "I grew up not far from here," Jonathan said quietly. "Lived in a shelter for 2 years when I was a kid." Penelope turned to stare at him. This man, in his $1,000 coat, driving a car worth more than she made in 5 years, had been homeless. My mom lost her job, he continued. Dad was never in the picture. We ended up on the streets when I was 9. Stayed in shelters, sometimes cars, sometimes under bridges. The light turned green. Jonathan drove forward, his face calm, but his knuckles white on the wheel. How did you— Penelope didn't know how to finish the question. Get out. He smiled, but it was sad. Hard work. A lot of luck. Some people who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Penelope felt something loosen in her chest. This wasn't just some rich guy playing hero. He understood what it meant to struggle. Arriving home, they pulled up outside her building. 4 stories of crumbling brick, windows patched with cardboard, broken security door hanging open. Penelope felt embarrassed suddenly. This is me. Jonathan looked at the building without judgment. I lived somewhere similar once. 6th floor, no elevator, heat that barely worked. 3rd floor for me. Heat works sometimes. Jonathan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a business card. Simple, white, with just his name and a phone number. Take this, he said, handing it to her. Penelope took the card. Why? Because everyone needs someone they can call when things get hard. His eyes met hers. If you ever need help, a ride, whatever, call me. Their fingers touched as she took the card. Just for a second, but Penelope felt warmth spread through her hand. Thank you, she whispered. For the ride, for not judging. Thank you for trusting me. Jonathan's voice was soft. Not many people would get in a stranger's car. Penelope opened the door, stepped out into the cold. She turned back. Jonathan, yes. How did you know my name? I only said it once. He smiled again, that same sad smile. I pay attention to important things. Penelope watched as he drove away, his taillights disappearing into the night. She looked down at the business card in her hand. Jonathan West. Real estate development. She climbed the dark stairs to her apartment, the card clutched tightly in her palm. Inside her tiny studio, she set it on the nightstand beside her bed. The days after, Penelope couldn't stop thinking about Jonathan. 3 days passed. She went to work, served coffee and pancakes, smiled at customers, counted her tips. But her mind kept drifting back to that night. To his voice, his story, the way he looked at her like she mattered. The business card stayed on her nightstand. Several times she picked it up, stared at the number, put it back down. What would she even say? Thank you again for the ride. That seemed weird. On the 4th day, Penelope's shift ended early. Gerald, the diner owner, sent her home because business was slow. She stopped at the grocery store on her way, needing milk and bread. She was reaching for a loaf when a familiar voice said, "We have to stop meeting like this." Penelope spun around. Jonathan stood there, holding a shopping basket. He wore jeans and a simple sweater. More casual than before, but still somehow elegant. Jonathan. Her heart jumped. Penelope, he smiled. A real smile this time. How have you been? Good. Busy with work. You didn't call. It wasn't an accusation. Just a statement. I didn't know what to say, Penelope admitted. Jonathan set down his basket. How about coffee? There's a place around the corner. Penelope looked at him. At the hope in his eyes. At the loneliness she recognized because she felt it too. Okay, she said. Coffee sounds good. They left their shopping baskets, walked out together into the gray afternoon, and Penelope felt, for the first time in years, like something in her life was about to change. The coffee shop was small, warm, filled with the smell of fresh pastries. They sat by the window and talked for 2 hours. About everything and nothing. About dreams and fears and the strange path that had brought them both to this moment. And when Penelope finally went home that evening, she knew this was just the beginning. The coffee shop confession. The coffee shop was called Rosie's. Red vinyl booths, checkered floors, windows that fogged up from the steam of fresh coffee. Penelope slid into a booth across from Jonathan. A waitress brought 2 mugs without asking, filling them with dark, strong coffee. You come here often? Penelope asked, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. Used to. When I first started my business, I'd work here for hours. Free refills, and Rosie never kicked me out. Jonathan smiled at the memory. I'd sit in that corner booth with my laptop, planning projects I couldn't afford yet. Penelope looked at the corner booth. A college student sat there now, textbooks spread across the table. And now? Now I owned 3 office buildings downtown. But I still remember what it felt like to count pennies for a cup of coffee. The waitress returned. Jonathan ordered a slice of apple pie. Penelope shook her head when offered, but Jonathan ordered 2 slices anyway. You need to eat, he said simply. You look tired. Penelope wanted to be offended, but he was right. She was tired. Bone deep, exhausted from working double shifts, from worrying about rent, from carrying the weight of her younger brother Tommy's college tuition on her shoulders. Tell me about your family, Jonathan said, pushing a plate toward her. Penelope took a small bite. The pie was warm, sweet, perfect. My parents died in a car accident 5 years ago. I have a brother, Tommy. He's 19, studying engineering at community college. I'm helping him pay for it. That's a lot of responsibility. He's smart. Deserves a chance. Penelope's voice was firm. I won't let him end up stuck like me. You're not stuck. You're surviving. There's a difference. Something in Jonathan's tone made Penelope look up. His eyes were intense, focused completely on her. She asked, Any family? The light in Jonathan's eyes dimmed. No, not anymore. Penelope waited, sensing there was more. Jonathan took a long drink of coffee. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. I was married. Her name was Rachel. We met 10 years ago when I was still working construction, trying to get my company off the ground. Past tense. Was married. Penelope's stomach tightened. She believed in me when I had nothing, Jonathan continued. Worked 2 jobs so I could focus on building the business. We got married in a courthouse. Couldn't afford a real wedding. But we were happy. He stopped, staring into his coffee cup. What happened? Penelope asked gently. 3 years ago, drunk driver. She was coming home from visiting her sister. Died instantly. Jonathan's hands tightened around his mug. I threw myself into work after that. Built the company bigger, made more money, bought expensive things. Thought it would fill the hole. It didn't. Penelope reached across the table, placed her hand over his. I'm sorry. Jonathan looked at their hands, then at her face. That's why I stopped that night. When I saw you at the bus stop, alone in the cold, I saw myself. All those nights I stood on street corners, wondering how I'd survive. I couldn't just drive past. I'm glad you didn't. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, people hurried past the window, bundled against the cold. Inside the coffee shop felt like its own small world. The invitation I have something to ask you, Jonathan said. And you can say no. I'll understand completely. Penelope felt nervous suddenly. What is it? I have a business dinner tomorrow night. Important clients, potential investors. I usually go alone, but he paused. I'd like you to come with me. Penelope pulled her hand back. Me. Jonathan, I don't belong at places like that. Why not? Look at me. I'm a waitress. I don't know anything about your world. You know about working hard? About taking care of people you love. About integrity. Jonathan leaned forward. Those people at the dinner, they'll talk about money and deals and profits, but half of them have never struggled for anything. That makes you more real than any of them. Penelope shook her head. I wouldn't know what to say. What to wear? Be yourself. That's all I'm asking. Jonathan's voice was earnest. And the dress code, I can help with that. No strings, no expectations. Just come with me, please. Penelope looked into his eyes and saw something that made her chest ache. He wasn't asking her to impress anyone. He was asking for support, for someone real in a world of fake smiles. Okay, she whispered. I'll come. Relief flooded Jonathan's face. Thank you. The business dinner the next evening, a package arrived at Penelope's apartment. Inside was a dress, deep emerald green, simple but elegant. Shoes that actually fit. A note in Jonathan's handwriting, you'll be perfect. I'll pick you up at 7. Penelope stared at herself in the mirror. The dress transformed her. She looked sophisticated, put together, like someone who belonged in Jonathan's world. But inside, her stomach churned with anxiety. Jonathan arrived exactly at 7. When she opened the door, his expression made all her worries disappear for a moment. "You look beautiful," he said softly. The restaurant was called the Sterling Room. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, waiters in tuxedos. Penelope's hands shook as they walked to the table where 3 men and 1 woman already sat. "Jonathan," finally, one of the men said, standing. His suit probably cost more than Penelope's rent. "We were starting to worry you'd stand us up." "Never. This is Penelope Brooks." "Penelope, these are my business partners. Richard Hammond, Diane Porter, and Stephen Mills." They all looked at her, evaluating, judging. "Lovely to meet you," Diane said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "What do you do, Penelope?" "I work in food service," Penelope said, keeping her voice steady. "Oh, how interesting." "Where?" "Gerald's Diner on 5th Street." Silence. Stephen raised an eyebrow. Richard smirked into his wine glass. Jonathan's hand found hers under the table. Squeezed gently. Standing her ground, the dinner dragged on. Course after course of food Penelope couldn't pronounce. Conversation about developments and portfolios and profit margins. She stayed quiet, feeling more out of place with every passing minute. Then Diane turned to her. "Penelope, what do you think about Jonathan's Riverside project? The one converting the old factory district?" Everyone looked at her, a test. They wanted to see her fail. Penelope took a breath. "I don't know the business details. But I know that neighborhood. My family lived there when I was a kid before we moved. Those buildings have history. If Jonathan's developing them, I hope he remembers that real people will use those spaces. Not just investors." Richard laughed. How charmingly naive. Jonathan's voice cut through, cold and sharp. "Penelope's right. Those buildings will house families, small businesses, real people. That's the entire point. If you can't see past profit margins, Richard, maybe you're in the wrong meeting." Richard's smile faded. Diane looked at Penelope with new interest. "You grew up in Riverside?" "Until I was 12. Before my dad lost his job. What does your father do now?" "He's dead. Car accident 5 years ago. My mother too." The table went silent. Even Richard looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry," Diane said, and this time her voice was genuine. The dinner continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. Stephen asked Penelope about the diner, seemed actually interested in her answers. Diane stopped testing her and started talking to her like a person. When they finally left, Penelope felt drained. The storm outside, the sky had opened up. Rain poured down in thick sheets. Lightning flashed across the Detroit skyline. "My car's in the garage 2 blocks away," Jonathan said. "We'll have to run for it." They ran. Within seconds, they were both soaked. Penelope's carefully styled hair came loose. Her dress clung to her body. Makeup ran down her face. They ducked under an awning, breathing hard. Penelope looked at herself in a shop window reflection and started laughing. She looked ridiculous. Jonathan laughed too, a genuine full laugh she hadn't heard from him before. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I probably embarrassed you in there. Are you kidding? You were amazing." Jonathan pushed wet hair back from his face. "You spoke the truth. Something none of them ever do. Richard hated me. Richard's always hated anyone real." Jonathan stepped closer. "Penelope, I didn't bring you tonight to impress them. I brought you because with you, I feel like myself. Not the businessman. Not the millionaire. Just Jonathan." Penelope's breath caught. They were standing so close. Rain pounded the pavement around them. The city felt far away. "I don't fit in your world," she whispered. "Then forget my world. Let's make our own." Jonathan cupped her face in his hands. His touch was gentle, warm, despite the cold rain. Penelope's heart hammered in her chest. "I'm falling for you," Jonathan said. "I didn't plan it, didn't want it, but I can't stop it. Jonathan, I'm nobody. Just a waitress trying to survive. You're everything." His voice was fierce. "You're real. You're strong. You're kind. Don't you see? All those people in there with their money and power, they're the ones who are nobody. You're the one who matters." Penelope felt tears mixing with the rain on her face. "I'm scared. So am I." He kissed her then. Soft at first, questioning. Penelope answered by wrapping her arms around his neck, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened. All the loneliness, all the longing, all the connection they'd felt from that first night poured into this moment. Rain soaked them completely, but neither cared. Jonathan's hands tangled in her wet hair. Penelope pressed against him, feeling his heart beat as fast as hers. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Come home with me," Jonathan whispered against her lips. Penelope pulled back slightly. "Jonathan, I can't. Not yet. This is all moving so fast." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Okay, then let me take you to your home. And tomorrow, we'll figure out what this is, together." They walked to his car hand in hand, soaking wet and smiling. Inside the warm car, Penelope looked at him and felt something shift in her chest. This was real. This was happening. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "Thank you for being you." At her door, he kissed her again, gentle and sweet. "Sleep well, Penelope. You too." She watched him drive away, then went inside. Her apartment felt different somehow, smaller, like she'd outgrown it in just one evening. Penelope changed into dry clothes and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Her life was changing. She could feel it. And for the first time in 5 years, since her parents died and her world fell apart, she felt hope. The discovery 3 days later, Penelope sat at the library computer. She told herself she was just curious. Just wanted to know more about Jonathan's business. But deep down, she knew she was looking for something else. She typed his name into the search bar. Jonathan West. Detroit real estate articles appeared. Lots of them. Photos of Jonathan at ribbon-cutting ceremonies, charity events, business conferences. He looked different in the pictures. More formal. More distant. Then she saw the headline. Tragedy strikes Detroit developer. Wife dies in highway crash. Penelope's hand froze on the mouse. She clicked the article with trembling fingers. The story laid out the facts coldly. Rachel West, 31 years old. Killed when a semi-truck crossed the median on Highway 94. The driver had been awake for 20 hours straight, fell asleep at the wheel. Rachel died on impact. Jonathan had been unreachable for comment. The article was 3 years old. Penelope clicked another link. This one had photos. Jonathan and Rachel at their small wedding. Rachel was beautiful. Long dark hair, bright smile, sophisticated in a way Penelope would never be. Another photo showed them at a charity gala. Rachel wore a stunning black gown. She looked like she belonged in Jonathan's world. Like she was made for it. Penelope looked at her own reflection in the dark computer screen. Tired eyes, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, cheap jacket with a broken zipper. She wasn't Rachel. Would never be Rachel. A horrible thought crept into her mind. What if Jonathan wasn't falling for her? What if he was just trying to fill the hole Rachel left? What if Penelope was just a replacement, a poor substitute for the woman he really loved? The library suddenly felt too small. Penelope logged off the computer and walked outside into the cold afternoon. Her chest felt tight. Her eyes burned with tears she refused to shed in public. The withdrawal that night, Jonathan called. Penelope stared at her phone, watching it ring. On the 4th ring, she declined the call. A text came through. "Is everything okay?" Penelope typed and deleted 3 responses before finally writing, "Just tired. Talk tomorrow." But tomorrow came and went. Penelope ignored his calls, his texts. She went to work, served coffee, smiled at customers. But inside, she felt hollowed out. She kept seeing those photos. Rachel's sophisticated beauty. The way Jonathan looked at her in the pictures, like she was his entire world. How could Penelope compete with a ghost? On the 3rd day of silence, Tommy called. Her brother's voice was excited. "Penny, you won't believe it. Someone anonymously paid my tuition for next semester. The whole thing. The school said it came from a private donor who wanted to remain unnamed. Penelope's heart stopped. When did this happen? They processed it today. Isn't it amazing? After she hung up, Penelope knew. Jonathan had done it. Somehow, he found out about Tommy's tuition and paid it. A grand gesture. A kind gesture. But it felt like charity. Like pity. Penelope put her head in her hands and cried. Outside. Her door knock came at 8 p.m. Penelope was sitting on her floor, back against the couch, staring at nothing. Penelope. Jonathan's voice came through the door. I know you're in there. Please open up. She didn't move. Jalba. You haven't answered my calls. Pause. If I did something wrong, tell me. Let me fix it. Silence. Okay. His voice was quieter now. I'll wait out here then. I'm not leaving until I know you're all right. Penelope heard him slide down the door. He was sitting on the floor in the hallway of her rundown building. Waiting. 20 minutes passed. Penelope listened to him breathing on the other side of the door. Finally, he spoke again. You found out about Rachel. Penelope's breath caught. I should have told you myself, Jonathan continued. Should have been honest from the start. I'm sorry. Penelope pressed her palm against the door, wishing she could touch him, but still afraid. She was my whole world, Jonathan said softly. When she died, I thought I'd never feel anything again. For 3 years, I just existed, worked, made money, felt nothing. Tara closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. Then I saw you at that bus stop. Cold, alone, tired, and something in me woke up. I don't know why. Maybe because you reminded me of who I used to be. Maybe because there was something in your eyes that called to something in mine. Paused. Penelope heard him take a shaky breath, not trying to replace Rachel. I could never replace her. But Penelope, you're not a replacement. You're something completely different. Something new. Something that makes me want to live again, not just exist. Penelope stood up. Her hand hovered over the door lock. I paid Tommy's tuition, Jonathan admitted. I know you probably hate that. But I did it because I understand what it's like to have dreams crushed by money. I had someone help me once, and it changed my life. I wanted to do the same for him. For you, I'm not a charity case, Penelope said through the door. Her voice cracked. I know. That's not why I did it. Jonathan's voice was firm. I did it because I care about you. Because your burdens matter to me. Because I want to help lighten the load you carry. Opening the door, Penelope unlocked the door. Opened it slowly. Jonathan sat on the floor in the hallway, back against the wall. He looked exhausted. His expensive coat was wrinkled. Hair messy. Eyes red-rimmed. Hi, he said. Hi. Penelope slid down to sit beside him in the hallway. They sat in silence for a moment. I saw the photos, Penelope finally said. Rachel was beautiful. Sophisticated. Everything I'm not. She was those things. She was also stubborn, terrible at cooking, and snored like a freight train.
Ow.
Jonathan smiled sadly. She was human, real, flawed, just like all of us. Dodd. I did. Very much. Jonathan turned to look at Penelope. And I'll always love her memory. But she's gone. And I'm still here. Still living. Still breathing. And I don't want to waste the rest of my life being alone because I'm afraid to feel again. Penelope wiped her eyes. What if I'm not enough? What if you realize I can't fill that space? You're not supposed to fill any space. You're supposed to create your own. Jonathan took her hand. Penelope, I'm not looking for another Rachel. I'm looking for a future, and I want you in it. Not because you're like her, but because you're you. I'm scared, Penelope whispered. Me too. Terrified, actually. Jonathan squeezed her hand. But being scared means it matters. And I'd rather be scared with you than safe and alone. Penelope looked at their joined hands. His palm was warm, calloused from years of construction work before the business took off. Real, solid. Tommy called, she said. About the tuition. I'm sorry I didn't ask first. But I'm not sorry I did it. Why? Because you shouldn't have to choose between your dreams and his. Because helping people I care about isn't charity, it's love. Jonathan's voice was gentle. And I think I'm falling in love with you, Penelope. Maybe I already have. Penelope's breath caught. Her heart pounded so loud she was sure he could hear it. I think I'm falling for you too, she admitted. That's why it scared me so much. Seeing those photos, seeing how perfect she was. I thought I could never measure up. You're not in competition with a ghost. You're just being yourself. And that's more than enough. They sat in the dingy hallway of her apartment building, holding hands like teenagers. Down the hall, someone's TV blared. A baby cried in another unit. Normal life continuing around them? What happens now? Penelope asked. Now we figure it out, together. Jonathan stood, pulling her up with him. No more running. No more hiding. Just honesty. Can you do that? Penelope nodded. Can you? I'll try. Every day. A new beginning. Penelope invited him inside. Her tiny studio, with its sagging couch and mismatched furniture. Jonathan looked around, not judging, just seeing. It's not much, Penelope said. It's yours. That makes it important. They sat on the couch. Jonathan pulled her close. Penelope rested her head on his shoulder, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong. Tell me about Rachel, she said. Really tell me? Not the perfect version. The real her, so Jonathan did. He talked about how Rachel burned dinner constantly, how she collected ceramic frogs for no reason, how she laughed too loud at movies and cried during commercials. He talked about their fights, their reconciliations, their dreams that never came true. He talked until his voice grew hoarse. And Penelope listened, understanding that this was his way of saying goodbye, not forgetting, but releasing. When he finished, silence settled over them. Thank you, Penelope whispered, for trusting me with that. Thank you for listening. They fell asleep on the couch, wrapped around each other. When morning came, sunlight streamed through the window. Penelope woke first, watching Jonathan sleep. His face was peaceful, younger, without the weight of grief pulling at his features. He opened his eyes. Saw her watching, smiled. Morning, he murmured. Morning. I should go. You probably have work. I have the day off, actually. Then spend it with me. Let me show you something. The old neighborhood. Jonathan drove them to Riverside, the old factory district he was developing. Buildings stood empty, windows broken, walls covered in graffiti. But crews were working, renovating, transforming. This is where I'm building affordable housing, Jonathan said as they walked. Mixed-income apartments. Small business spaces on the ground floors. Community gardens in the courtyards. It's incredible. It's my way of giving back, of remembering where I came from. He stopped in front of a building that looked slightly better than the others. This one's almost finished. Want to see inside? They climbed the stairs. The apartments were small but well designed. Natural light, good materials, attention to detail. Gosh, these will rent for half the market rate, Jonathan explained. I'm eating the cost difference. The profits from my commercial properties cover it. Penelope looked at him with new understanding. This wasn't just business. This was personal. You're a good person, Jonathan West. I'm trying to be. Some days I fail, but I keep trying. They stood in an empty apartment, sunlight streaming through clean windows. Outside, the city hummed with life. I want you to be part of this, Jonathan said. Not the business side. Just my life, whatever that looks like. However fast or slow you want to go, I just want you there. Penelope stepped close to him, looked up into his eyes. I want that too. I'm still scared. Still figuring out how someone like me fits with someone like you. But I want to try. We'll figure it out together. He kissed her then. Soft and sweet and full of promise. And Penelope knew, standing in that empty apartment with morning light all around them. That this was just the beginning, not an ending. Not a replacement for what was lost, but something entirely new. Something built on truth and understanding, and two broken people choosing to be whole together. "Let's go get breakfast," Penelope said, when they broke apart. "I know a great diner." Jonathan laughed. "Lead the way." They left hand in hand, walking out into the Detroit morning. Two people from different worlds, building a bridge between them. And for the first time in years, both of them felt hope. 3 months later, the diner was packed for Sunday brunch. Penelope moved between tables with practiced ease, coffee pot in hand. But now when she smiled at customers, the smile reached her eyes. Tommy sat in a corner booth, studying. His textbooks spread across the table. When he saw Penelope, he waved. Jonathan walked in, spotting her immediately. He'd been at a meeting but drove straight here after. Not to his expensive downtown condo. To this run-down diner where the coffee was cheap and the waitress was extraordinary. Penelope saw him, her face lighting up. "Your usual table?" "Always." As she poured his coffee, their hands touched. Such a small gesture, but it held everything. Trust, understanding. Love that grew slowly, carefully, built on a foundation of truth. "Dinner tonight?" Jonathan asked. "I'm cooking you." "Cook? I'm learning." "It might be terrible. I can't wait." Outside, Detroit moved forward. People rushing to their next destination. But inside the diner, time slowed. Two people who found each other on the worst night, building something beautiful from broken pieces. Penelope returned to her tables. Jonathan watched her work, marveling at how one missed bus changed everything. How saying yes to a stranger became saying yes to a future neither of them planned but both wanted. And when she brought him his breakfast, sitting down across from him during her break, they talked and laughed like they'd known each other forever, because in all the ways that mattered, they had.